Naomi had always been the top student, standing at the peak with no one able to surpass her. But when Sophie arrived, everything changed. Once a math prodigy admired by everyone, Sophie suddenly lost her ability to learn. Her hands trembled when writing. She dozed off in class and her grades plummeted without explanation. No one understood what was happening until a horrifying truth was revealed. A dark force had stolen her future. But what shocked everyone even more was how Sophie took everything back, and the terrifying backlash that made the mastermind behind it all pay a painful price. Could an unseen power really manipulate human destiny? Was Naomi truly innocent, or was she hiding a chilling secret? Watch until the end of the story to uncover the shocking truth. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Naomi was the pride of Windsor Academy. Since she stepped into the school, she had been the undisputed top student, excelling in every subject and winning every competition. She was not only intelligent, but also charming, kind, and adored by both teachers and students. Her mother, Angela, took great pride in her daughter's success, making sure she had the best education, the finest clothes, and the admiration of everyone around her. Angela owned a prestigious fashion boutique in the city, which provided her with enough wealth to give Naomi everything she needed to shine. Every year at Windsor Academy's award ceremony, Naomi's name was called repeatedly as she collected trophies and certificates, her bright smile lighting up the auditorium. Parents would whisper to their children, urging them to be more like Naomi. Teachers would nod in approval, praising her dedication and intelligence. Some parents even approached Angela to ask if she had hired private tutors for her daughter. Angela would simply smile and say Naomi studies on her own. She is just naturally gifted. But everything changed when Sophie Westwood arrived. Sophie was the daughter of Evelyn Westwood, a wealthy businesswoman from New York. From the moment Sophie stepped into Windsor Academy, she turned heads. She was not only beautiful, but incredibly intelligent. Within the first week, she solved complex math problems faster than anyone else, even faster than some of the teachers. Students began calling her the human calculator. Teachers admired her sharp mind, and whispers soon filled the hallways. Do you think Sophie will be the new top student? Maybe she will beat Naomi at the awards this year. The words stung Naomi. She had always been the star, the one everyone looked up to. The idea of someone taking her place made her stomach twist in discomfort. But Naomi was not the type to let jealousy consume her. Instead, she did what she always did when a new student started to shine. She extended a hand of friendship. One afternoon, Naomi approached Sophie with a warm smile, holding a beautifully wrapped gift. Sophie, welcome to Windsor Academy. I got you a little something to make you feel at home. Sophie hesitated, looking at the box before shaking her head. Thank you, Naomi, but my mom says I shouldn't accept gifts from people I don't know well. Naomi froze. No one had ever refused a gift from her before. She forced a smile, but inside something unsettled her. As the days passed, things only got worse. A major school competition was announced, and students were divided into teams. Naomi and Sophie were each chosen as team captains. The competition was intense, but in the end, Sophie's team won by a landslide. The teachers and students cheered for Sophie, praising her leadership and intelligence. Naomi's hands clenched into fists. She had never lost before. That night, she went home and poured out her frustration to her mother. Mama, I tried to give Sophie a gift like I always do, but she wouldn't accept it. And now everyone keeps talking about her. What if she takes my place? Angela's expression darkened. This Sophie, did you at least smile when you gave her the gift? Yes, Mama, but she refused. She said her mother warned her not to take gifts from strangers. Angela's eyes gleamed with a strange light. She placed a reassuring hand on Naomi's shoulder, her voice calm and steady. You don't need to worry, my dear. Just keep pretending to be friendly. I will handle the rest. Naomi nodded, relief washing over her. She knew exactly what her mother meant. Angela's gifts to Naomi's classmates and teachers were not ordinary gifts. They were tools. Each gift carried a hidden price. Those who accepted them unknowingly exchanged a part of their talent, their luck, or even their future. Angela used these exchanges to expand her own business and to ensure Naomi remained the brightest student in the school. It was a silent agreement between mother and daughter. one they both understood without words. That night, as the clock struck midnight and the city fell into silence, Angela whispered strange words under her breath. A dark mist swirled around her as she sat in the center of her dimly lit room. Her eyes glowed with an eerie light as she spoke. Far away in Sophie's bedroom, the girl slept soundly, unaware of the shadowy presence that had materialized beside her bed. Angela stood over Sophie, murmuring a spell under her breath. The air around Sophie shimmered for a moment before everything returned to normal. Angela vanished without a trace, leaving the room exactly as it had been. The next day, something changed. Every time a teacher introduced a new topic in class, Sophie would suddenly feel exhausted. Her eyelids grew heavy, and she would fall asleep right at her desk. At first, students thought it was funny, laughing as she snored softly. But as the days went by, it became clear that something was wrong. No matter how hard she tried, she could not stay awake during lessons. Even when she tried to explain to her mother, Evelyn was too busy to listen. "Just get more sleep, honey." "You are probably stressed," she would say before rushing off to another meeting. The real problem began during a math lesson. As usual, Sophie raised her hand first, confident she could solve the equation on the board. The teacher nodded and Sophie walked up to the front of the class. She picked up the marker, but the moment her fingers touched it, a jolt ran through her body. It felt like an electric shock, sharp and sudden. She gasped and dropped the marker. "Sophie, what's wrong?" She hesitated, then tried again, but the same sensation returned, stronger this time. A strange numbness spread through her fingers. She pulled her hand back quickly, shaking her head. The teacher sighed in frustration. "Stop being silly, Sophie. Pick up the marker and solve the problem." Sophie tried again, but she could not do it. The marker slipped from her trembling fingers, and she felt a rising panic in her chest. During a test later that week, the same thing happened. She picked up her pen, but her hands would not cooperate. Her once neat handwriting became shaky, almost unreadable. Her mind felt foggy, as if something was blocking her thoughts. For the first time in her life, Sophie failed a test. At night, things were worse. She would wake up gasping for air, her body drenched in sweat. Every time she closed her eyes, she found herself in a dark, endless space filled with shadowy figures. In her dreams, a faceless figure would place a bowl of food in front of her. She wanted to refuse, but something forced her to eat. The moment she took a bite, a thick fog clouded her mind, and she would wake up feeling drained, unable to remember anything. Her classmates noticed the change. The whispers started. "Have you noticed how weird Sophie has been acting? She used to be the smartest, and now she can't even hold a pen. Maybe she just got lazy." Sophie felt their whispers but kept her head down. Once a bright, confident girl, she now hid behind tired eyes and trembling hands. Every day she tried to tell her mother what was happening, but Evelyn, always preoccupied with work, would brush her off. "We will talk about it later, dear." But later never came. As the days passed, Sophie's condition worsened, and Naomi, watching from her seat in class, could not help but smile. Everything was going exactly as planned. As the days passed, Sophie's condition continued to deteriorate. She could no longer keep up with lessons, and her once sharp mind felt clouded and sluggish. No matter how much she tried to focus, the words on the pages blurred together, and she struggled to remember simple concepts that had once been second nature to her. During lunch breaks, she would sit alone, staring blankly at her untouched tray of food. She was always exhausted, her body drained of energy, and her once vibrant spirit seemed to have faded. Some of her classmates still admired her and tried to help, but others had already moved on, whispering about how Sophie had changed. Naomi, on the other hand, had regained her place at the top. Teachers once again praised her intelligence, and students once again looked up to her. It was as if Sophie's brief reign had never happened. Angela watched with quiet satisfaction, knowing that her daughter's future was secure. One evening, after another failed test, Sophie sat in her room, staring at her reflection in the mirror. She barely recognized herself. Her eyes were dull, her skin pale, and there were dark circles beneath her eyes. She knew something was wrong, something beyond exhaustion or stress, but she had no idea what it was. She tried once again to talk to her mother. Evelyn was in her home office, flipping through documents, barely looking up when Sophie walked in. "Mom, I need to talk to you." Evelyn sighed, setting down her pen. "Sophie, I have a lot on my plate right now. Can this wait?" "No, it can't." The urgency in Sophie's voice made Evelyn finally look at her daughter. For the first time, she noticed how different Sophie looked. "What is going on with you?" "You look awful." Sophie swallowed, trying to find the right words. "I don't know. Something is wrong with me. I can't focus. I keep falling asleep in class. My hands shake when I try to write. And I keep having these nightmares." Evelyn frowned. "Nightmares?" Sophie nodded. "Every night I see a dark figure. It gives me something to eat. And no matter how hard I try to resist, I always take a bite. Then everything goes black, and when I wake up, I feel weaker than before." Evelyn was silent for a long moment. Then she sighed and shook her head. "Sophie, you're under a lot of pressure. Maybe you're just overwhelmed. We can take a short vacation if you need a break." Sophie's heart sank. "No, Mom, this is not just stress." "I know it is not." She ended the call and sat on the couch, lost in thought. At that moment, her phone rang again. This time, it was her old friend, Sarah Phillips. Sarah was a deeply religious woman, someone Evelyn had grown distant from over the years. She had always found Sarah's beliefs a little too intense, but for some reason she picked up the call. "Evelyn, it has been a while." "It has," Evelyn said, trying to sound casual. Sarah hesitated, then said, "I had a strange feeling about you and your daughter. I do not know what is happening, but I felt like I needed to reach out." Evelyn let out a shaky breath. "Sarah, something is wrong with Sophie. I do not know what to do. Tell me everything." Evelyn recounted the past few weeks, Sophie's sudden decline, the nightmares, the unexplained exhaustion. When she finished, there was silence on the other end of the line. Sarah's voice was serious when she finally spoke. "Evelyn, this is not normal. Someone has done something to your child." Evelyn felt a chill go down her spine. "What do you mean? "I mean, someone is trying to take away her gift," Sarah said firmly. "Someone is stealing her light." Evelyn shook her head. "That is ridiculous, is it?" Sarah asked. "Do you really believe this is just stress? Look at your daughter. Does she look like someone who is simply overwhelmed?" Evelyn could not argue with that. "What do I do? Bring her to me." Now Evelyn did not know why she listened, but that night she took Sophie to Sarah's house. The moment Sarah saw Sophie, she gasped. "Who did this to her?" Sophie looked at her in confusion. "What do you mean?" Sarah knelt in front of her. "Sweetheart, someone has been feeding on you." Sophie's breath hitched. "Feeding on me," Sarah nodded. "But do not worry, we are going to fix this." She led Sophie to the center of the room and placed a hand on her forehead. "In the name of the Lord, I break every chain holding this child." Sophie gasped, clutching her stomach. A wave of nausea hit her and suddenly she fell to her knees, coughing violently. She vomited a strange white substance onto the floor. Evelyn's eyes widened in horror. Sophie collapsed, panting. But for the first time in weeks, her mind felt clear. Sarah exhaled, placing a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "It is over." But it was not over. Somewhere in the city, Angela sat in her room, staring at her burned hand. She had tried to perform another ritual that night, but something had gone horribly wrong. A powerful force had struck her, leaving her injured. She gritted her teeth. Sophie was fighting back. Angela turned to Naomi, who was watching her with wide eyes. "We need to finish this once and for all." The battle was far from over. Angela sat in her dimly lit room, the air thick with tension. Her burned hand throbbed painfully, a stark reminder that something had gone wrong. She had always been careful, always ensured that her rituals were executed flawlessly. But this time, something had struck back, something powerful enough to push her away. She clenched her fists. She was not about to lose to a child. Naomi watched her mother with wide eyes. For the first time, she saw uncertainty in Angela's face. "Is Sophie getting stronger?" Naomi asked, her voice hesitant. Angela exhaled slowly, pressing her fingers to her temple. "Someone is protecting her. Someone who knows how to fight back." Naomi felt a chill run down her spine. "What do we do now?" Angela turned to her daughter, her gaze hardening. "We finish this. Sophie cannot win. You have worked too hard for your place, and I will not let her take it from you. Meanwhile, at Sarah's house, Sophie sat on the couch, her body still weak from the ritual. But for the first time in weeks, her mind felt clear. She no longer felt the heavy fog clouding her thoughts, no longer had the strange numbness in her hands. Sarah placed a comforting hand on her shoulder. "How do you feel?" Sophie took a deep breath. "Better." Sarah nodded. "But this is not over yet. Whoever did this to you will try again. We need to make sure they do not succeed." Evelyn, who had been silent, finally spoke. "What do we need to do?" Sarah met her gaze. "Pray, protect her, and most importantly, do not let her be alone." That night, Sophie and Evelyn stayed at Sarah's house. Sarah led them in prayer, her voice steady and full of authority. As they prayed, a strange warmth filled the room, a protective energy that surrounded Sophie like an invisible shield. But across town, Angela was preparing for her final move. At the stroke of midnight, she lit a row of candles, her lips moving in silent incantations. The air in the room grew heavy, thick with an unnatural energy. Naomi watched, her heart pounding. "Tonight is the last night," Angela murmured. "When this is done, Sophie will never challenge you again." At that very moment, back at Sarah's house, Sophie felt a sudden pressure in her chest. Her breath hitched, and she clutched her heart. Sarah's eyes snapped open. "It has begun." Evelyn rushed to her daughter's side. "What is happening?" Sarah grabbed a small vial of oil and dipped her fingers in it, tracing a cross on Sophie's forehead. "You need to fight, Sophie. Do not let her win." Sophie's body trembled as an overwhelming force seemed to press down on her. She squeezed her eyes shut, her mind filling with whispers. "You are weak. You are nothing. Give up." But deep inside, something pushed back. Number A, sudden burst of light erupted around her, sending a powerful shock wave through the air. Back in her room, Angela screamed, clutching her head as the ritual backfired. The candles around her flickered violently before extinguishing all at once. She gasped for breath, feeling an unbearable heat sear through her body. Then, without warning, a blinding flash of fire engulfed her hands. Naomi screamed as Angela collapsed to the floor, writhing in pain. Mama Angela's skin burned, her body convulsing as she let out a cry of agony. The very power she had used against others had turned against her. At that moment, Naomi understood. This was the price. The next morning at Windsor Academy, whispers filled the halls. "Did you hear Naomi and her mom left town? I heard they disappeared without a trace." No one knew exactly what had happened, but one thing was clear. Naomi and Angela were gone. Sophie walked through the hallways, her steps lighter than they had been in weeks. She no longer felt the weight of exhaustion, no longer carried the fear that had plagued her for so long. She had fought back, and she had won. That evening, as she sat with her mother at the dinner table, Evelyn took her hands. "I am sorry I did not listen to you sooner." Sophie smiled, squeezing her mother's hands. "You are here now. That is what matters." Across the city, Angela sat in a darkened room, her burned hands wrapped in bandages. Naomi sat beside her, silent, staring at the floor. They had lost everything. Angela's voice was barely a whisper. "We should have never underestimated her." Naomi did not respond, because deep down, she knew the truth. Some things should never be stolen, some powers should never be tampered with, and some battles are never truly won. The lesson was clear. No matter how much someone tries to manipulate fate, no matter how much darkness they wield, light will always fight back. Now a question remains. What would you do if you discovered someone was trying to steal your destiny? Would you fight back or let them win? Let me know in the comments, and if you enjoyed this story, do not forget to like, share, and subscribe.